Maria Santos had been driving 18-wheelers for 15 years, her weathered hands gripping the steering wheel of her Peterbilt 379 with the confidence of someone who had logged over 2 million miles across America's highways. At 43, she was one of the few women in long-haul trucking, a world dominated by men who had learned to respect her skill behind the wheel and her fierce independence on the road. The chrome cross dangling from her rearview mirror caught the late afternoon sun as she navigated through the winding mountain passes of Colorado, hauling a load of medical supplies from Denver to a hospital in Phoenix. It had been a routine run, one she'd made countless times before, but something felt different about this trip. A heaviness had settled in her chest 3 days ago when she'd received the call from her sister Rosa in Tucumcari, New Mexico. "The doctors say there's nothing more they can do for little Miguel," Rosa had whispered through tears over the phone. "The leukemia, it's everywhere now. They're talking about weeks, maybe days." Miguel was Rosa's 8-year-old son, Maria's godson, the bright-eyed boy who called her Tia Camionera, Aunt Trucker. He was the light of their small family, and now that light was dimming with each passing day in a hospital bed hundreds of miles away from where Maria sat in her truck-stop diner, mechanically eating eggs that tasted like cardboard. She had been driving for 36 hours straight, pushing the legal limits and her own endurance, desperate to finish this haul so she could deadhead to New Mexico to be with her family. The weight of grief and helplessness pressed down on her shoulders heavier than any load she'd ever carried. As darkness fell over the Arizona desert, Maria's eyelids grew heavy. She knew she needed rest, but every minute felt precious now. She pulled into a truck stop outside Flagstaff, a place where the neon lights couldn't quite chase away the vast darkness of the high desert. After securing her rig and performing her mandatory safety checks, she climbed into the sleeper cab behind her seat. The small space was her home away from home, decorated with photos of her family, a few religious icons, and the faded Mexican flag her father had given her when she first started driving. She knelt beside her narrow bunk, clasped her hands together, and prayed as she had every night since Rosa's call. "Virgencita," she whispered, addressing the small statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe that sat on her dashboard shelf, "please don't let that little boy suffer. He's so young, so full of life. If you must take someone, take me instead. I've lived my life. Let him live his." Exhaustion finally overcame her grief, and Maria fell into a deep, troubled sleep. In her dream, she found herself walking along a highway that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions, but this wasn't like any road she'd ever traveled. The asphalt gleamed like polished obsidian, and the sky above swirled with colors she couldn't name, deeper than purple, brighter than gold, more peaceful than any blue she'd ever seen. She was no longer in her truck, no longer wearing her worn jeans and company t-shirt. Instead, she walked in a simple white dress that seemed to move with a breeze she couldn't feel. Her feet were bare, but the road beneath them was warm and smooth as silk. In the distance, a figure appeared, walking toward her with a grace that made the very air seem to sing. As the figure drew closer, Maria's heart began to race with recognition and awe. It was a woman of indescribable beauty, her skin luminous with an inner light, her dark hair flowing like liquid starlight. She wore robes of deep blue starred with gold, and around her was an aura of roses, their fragrance filling the impossible air. "My daughter," the woman spoke, and her voice was like the sound of gentle rain on summer earth, like the whisper of wind through wheat fields, like every lullaby Maria's grandmother had ever sung. "Why do you carry such sorrow in your heart?" Maria fell to her knees on the star-bright highway. She had been raised Catholic, had attended Mass faithfully despite her irregular schedule, had prayed the rosary countless times in her cab during lonely nights. She knew without doubt that she was in the presence of the Holy Virgin, Our Lady of Guadalupe, the patroness of Mexico and the protector of the faithful. "Holy Mother," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face, "my godson is dying. He's just a baby, and the doctors say there's no hope. Please, I beg you, have mercy on him. Take my life instead. I offer it willingly." The Virgin Mary smiled, and the expression held such compassion that Maria felt her heart would break from the beauty of it. She knelt beside Maria and placed her hands on the trucker's weathered face, hands that were soft as rose petals and warm as summer sunshine. "Your love for the child honors you, daughter. But his path is not yet finished, nor is yours. You have been chosen for a purpose greater than you know." Her eyes, dark as midnight and deep as eternity, seemed to look directly into Maria's soul. "Tomorrow, when the sun reaches its highest point, you will find yourself at the place where faith and doubt meet on the highway. There you must choose to believe without seeing, to act without understanding. Will you trust me? Yes, Holy Mother, I will trust you with my life, Maria replied without hesitation. The Virgin nodded and began to fade like morning mist. But as she disappeared, she left behind a single red rose that fell into Maria's hands. Follow your heart, not your map, my daughter. And remember, miracles happen not because we deserve them, but because love demands them. Maria woke with a start in her sleeper cab, the first rays of dawn filtering through her curtains. Her heart was pounding, and she could swear she still smelled roses in the air. She looked at her hands, half expecting to find the rose from her dream, but saw only the calluses and scars of years spent handling chains, tarps, and tie-downs. For a moment, she wondered if it had been just a dream born of grief and exhaustion. But then she noticed something that made her blood run cold with awe. On her dashboard, next to her statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe, lay a single perfect red rose, its petals still fresh with dew. Her hands trembling, Maria picked up the rose and breathed in its impossibly sweet fragrance. It was real. The dream had been real. The Holy Virgin had visited her in the night and left this sign of her presence. Maria quickly checked her satellite navigation system. According to her route, she should continue south on I-17, then take I-10 west to complete her delivery in Phoenix. But the Virgin's words echoed in her mind, "Follow your heart, not your map." Her heart was pulling her southeast, toward New Mexico, toward her dying godson. She made a decision that went against every instinct of her professional training. She called her dispatcher and requested permission to deliver her load early by routing through Albuquerque instead of Phoenix, claiming a family emergency. Miraculously, the hospital agreed to the schedule change, and her company approved the route deviation. As she drove through the morning, the rose on her dashboard remained fresh and fragrant, defying all natural law. Other truckers on the CB radio began commenting on an unusual weather phenomenon, a column of warm air that seemed to be moving southeast across Arizona and New Mexico, bringing unseasonably mild temperatures and the scent of flowers to the high desert. At exactly noon, as the sun reached its zenith, Maria found herself approaching the intersection of I-40 and Highway 84, near the small town of Santa Rosa, New Mexico. This was where she would need to decide, continue to her delivery destination or follow her heart toward Tucumcari and her family. She had never taken an unauthorized detour in 15 years of professional driving. Her record was spotless, her reputation impeccable. But the Virgin's words rang in her ears, "There you must choose to believe without seeing, to act without understanding." Maria took the exit toward Tucumcari. As she drove the familiar highway toward her sister's town, something extraordinary began to happen. Other vehicles, cars, motorcycles, even other trucks, began following her. She noticed it first on the CB radio, drivers talking about being inexplicably drawn to follow that Peterbilt with the rose on the dash. Then she saw them in her mirrors, a growing caravan of vehicles trailing behind her like a modern-day version of the wise men following the star to Bethlehem. By the time she reached Tucumcari Regional Hospital, nearly 50 vehicles had joined the procession. The parking lot filled with people from all walks of life, truckers, families, travelers, all drawn by something they couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Maria parked her rig and ran into the hospital, the rose clutched in her hand, the crowd following at a respectful distance. She found Rosa in the pediatric ward, sitting beside Miguel's bed. The boy was barely conscious, his small body ravaged by the disease, machines beeping softly around him. "Maria!" Rosa cried, embracing her sister. "I'm so glad you came. The doctors say it won't be long now." Maria approached her godson's bedside and knelt down, just as she had in her dream. Miguel's eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. "Tia Camionera," he whispered. "Did you bring me something from the road?" Tears streaming down her face, Maria placed the red rose in the boy's small hands. "This is from someone who loves you very much, Mijo. Someone who told me that miracles happen because love demands them." As soon as Miguel's fingers touched the rose, something miraculous occurred. The flower began to glow with a soft, warm light that filled the entire room. The machines monitoring his vital signs began to beep more rapidly, but not with alarm, with renewed life. Color returned to the boy's pale cheeks, strength flowed back into his weakened limbs, and he sat up in bed with wonder in his eyes. I feel good, Tia. Really good." The doctors rushed in, alerted by the unusual readings on their monitors. Dr. Martinez, who had been treating Miguel for months, stared at the instruments in disbelief. "This is impossible," he muttered, then began running test after test. Each one confirmed what his eyes could barely accept: the leukemia was gone. Completely gone. Miguel's blood work showed no trace of cancer cells, his bone marrow was producing healthy blood cells, and his organs were functioning perfectly. Word of the miracle spread quickly through the hospital, then the town, then across the state and nation. The crowd that had followed Maria grew to hundreds, then thousands, as people came to witness the unexplainable healing. The rose, which Miguel still held, continued to emit its gentle light and sweet fragrance, and everyone who touched it reported feeling a profound sense of peace and hope. Medical experts flew in from around the world to study Miguel's case, but could find no scientific explanation for his complete and instantaneous recovery. Religious authorities investigated the claims of miraculous healing, interviewing witnesses and documenting the events. The Catholic Church would later declare it an authentic miracle, attributing it to the intercession of Our Lady of Guadalupe. But for Maria, the greatest miracle wasn't Miguel's healing, though she thanked God every day for that blessing. The greatest miracle was the transformation that occurred in her own heart and in the hearts of everyone who witnessed the event. She had experienced firsthand the truth that the Virgin had spoken: miracles happen not because we deserve them, but because love demands them. Maria returned to trucking, but her life was forever changed. She became known as the Highway Angel, and her route became a pilgrimage of sorts for people seeking hope and healing. She would often find people waiting at truck stops along her regular runs, not for medical miracles, though several more were reported over the years, but for the peace and faith that seemed to radiate from her presence. The rose, preserved under glass in the Tucumcari Hospital Chapel, never wilted or faded. Miguel grew up healthy and strong, eventually becoming a doctor himself, dedicating his life to caring for sick children. Rosa often said that her son had been given two gifts that day: his life and his calling. Years later, when Maria finally retired from the road, she was asked by a reporter what she had learned from her experience. She looked out at the highway stretching toward the horizon, where heat mirages danced like angels, and smiled. "I learned that when the Holy Mother calls you to trust without understanding, to love without limits, to believe in the impossible, the only answer is yes. And I learned that every mile we travel, every load we carry, every person we meet along the way is part of a greater journey than we can imagine. We're all just travelers on the same highway, looking for home, and sometimes, if we're very blessed, we get to be the instrument of someone else's miracle." The cross still hangs from the rearview mirror of her old Peterbilt, which sits in a place of honor in the Trucking Museum in Tucumcari. Visitors often report smelling roses near the truck, though no roses grow anywhere nearby. Miguel, now Dr. Miguel Santos, keeps the keys to his Tia Camionera's truck on his desk at the Children's Hospital where he works, a reminder that miracles come to those who dare to follow their hearts instead of their maps. And somewhere on America's highways, other truckers carry on Maria's legacy, their CB radios crackling with stories of hope, their loads carrying more than cargo, carrying the possibility that around the next bend, at the next truck stop, in the next moment of crisis, the divine might break through in ways that defy explanation but demand belief. The highway continues, endless and full of promise, just as it was in Maria's dream. And those who travel it with faith sometimes find that the road leads not just to their destination, but to their destiny.